Today, we live in a time of change. From the kinds of cars we drive to the types of food that we buy, everything that we consume is changing. And the construction sector is not far behind that. This change is beginning to seep into the construction sector as a disagreement between two ways of doing things has come about. So the construction sector is responsible for 39% of the global carbon emissions every year. This is a sector that employs 11 million US citizens, and the effect on public health when it comes to engineering for earthquakes and floods can be enormous. One side of the sector desires that things continue in the current linear state that they are. And this is basically the way that things are made for a certain purpose. They're used until they're too weak to be continued to be used, and then they're getting rid of. And things can try to be recycled and salvaged, but certainly not more than 90% of what they're making is even close to that. People want to keep this side because the financial impact. There's very little drawback. They don't have to pay engineers to design things with the end in mind. They don't have to redesign the entire system. And the demolition jobs now are cheap because there isn't a lot of process to it. It's basically just destroy the building, get as much stuff out of there as fast as you can. Side B wants to turn things into a more circular system. And this means that they want to design things with the end in mind. So something like a beam would be designed so that it can be later taken out of the building when that building is no longer needed and put into the next building that is put there. And people like that because it doesn't require new resources to be transported to the manufacturing factory. It doesn't require as much, waste. It really cuts back on waste. One of the drawbacks to this side, though, is that there is way more payment in terms of labor because you have to have someone go deconstruct the building. You have to have engineers design how you're going to be able to reuse the steel in multiple settings. And yeah, there is more work to it. Personally, I believe that the circular system is much better. I think that the financial setback is temporary as the businesses in the industry will figure their stuff out about how to pay the engineers to get the job done, and that will definitely cost more money. But once it's set up, there won't be more need to pay people to design things once they're already designed. And kind of an example of how this is already working in the world today is in a carpet in most buildings that are used for private companies in England, and they use a carpet that the top can be stripped from the bottom and sent back to the factory where it was originally made. And where it's originally made, it's also be able to, the base gets melted down and the top layer gets taken off and cleaned and refined, and then the base is reformed into a new base without any imperfections in it, and the new cleaned wire on the top is threaded back into the new base. So it uses entirely the same materials that it had in the first place, but it makes a carpet that is new and it appears to be brand new, and then that gets shipped back. So how this stuff works is instead of paying for something and then you owning it forever, pretty much until you decide to resell it, these things are actually leased. So if you were to buy this carpet, per se, you'd buy it for 20 years. And then at the end of the 20 years, you have to send it back. And when you send it back, they'll send you a new one if you decide to continue the lease. And that's kind of how the circular systems in construction work. Yeah, I think the world needs to move towards more things like this to really reduce carbon emissions and lower just our overall impact in the way things are going.